Hey everyone, today is my 45th birthday, and in addition to giving away $30 of free Bitcoin to friends and followers on Facebook, I wanted to share a PowerPoint presentation that I've been working on with Nathan McNeil. Now, Nathan McNeil is one of the co-founders of Baumgar Corporation, and he is a PowerPoint wizard. And so he and I have been working through the concepts. He's been doing all of the PowerPoint actual work. And I think the presentation is pretty awesome. So what we're trying to do is build the world's most amazing Bitcoin PowerPoint to understand how, or to explain to people how Bitcoin works, what it is, what money is, why money is broken, and all of that. The goal is to make the absolute most basic ground level PowerPoint because there's tons of stuff floating around on the internet about Bitcoin, and most of it's just too hard for average people to understand. So we're trying to really get a baseline, something that anyone can follow. So for my birthday present, I want your feedback. That's all I want. That's all I want for my 45th birthday today is I want your feedback on this presentation. Where does it miss the mark? Where does it hit the mark? How good a presentation is it? Basically, how close have we gotten to, to creating a really good PowerPoint presentation to present at anything? And we're going to post this online so people can just download it for free. So they can present it at Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, gatherings, I don't know, just anywhere that people need a public speaker. I want somebody to be able to go online, find this PowerPoint, present it, and give a good overview of money and Bitcoin to just whoever's interested. So that's my goal with this, and I want your feedback. Okay, so I'm going to go full screen on this presentation here. Whoops. Well, let me move my Zoom controls around so it will let me full screen this presentation. There we go. And I will put myself in, I don't know what is, hold on, I got to get myself in optimal little mode. There we go. Trying to get in optimal little mode. All right, I think I'm in optimal little mode. All right, so get my Zoom controls out. All right, so slide one. What happened to money and how can we fix it? All right, you may have noticed that prices are rising. For example, not loving it, the price of a Big Mac is up 12x, that is 1,200% since 1968. The same darn Campbell's soup is up 10x. It's 10 times more expensive since 1973. And in both of these cases, we don't have this on the slide yet, but I think we'll add it. Your wages have not gone up by 12x or by 10x. So we will show some way or another that, basically it's much harder for the average person to buy a Big Mac or to buy a can of Campbell's soup based on how many hours they have to work or based on the average wages or whatever. Short take is your paycheck hadn't kept up with that. It is much harder for the average American to buy a Big Mac or a can of Campbell's soup or pretty much anything else since 1968 or 1973. Pick your start date. The same stuff is about 20 times more expensive. That's 2,000% more expensive in the last 100 years between 1925 and 2025. Now, obviously, some of those items have been upgraded a little bit, but in general, the major costs for the same things you need to do costs 20 times more. That's 2,000% more. So one thing I'm going to back up here. One thing I want your feedback on is should we use percentages or X's? Is it 12X or 1,200%? Which one is better for that slide? For this slide, is it 1,000% or 10X? Which one is easier to understand? And for here, is it 2,000% or is it 20X? Which is better to explain that? Okay. So the problem with prices is actually a problem with money. I want your feedback on whether that comment makes sense. But here's what I mean. Why do we need money to start with? What do we use money for in the first place? Well, money makes it easy to trade. The whole reason we have money is because it is hard to trade. Eggs for a cow, cow for a house, house for eggs. Those things are hard to trade, and so we use money. Money sits in between, and it makes it easy to trade. That's what money does. It makes things easy to trade. You can trade in and out of the money, and that way you don't have to trade for the stuff, which is called barter. Okay, so bad money is not easy to trade. For example, it's hard to spend a cow. It's not divisible if the cow is still alive. It's hard to send a house. It's not very mobile, hard to move it around, not very portable. Hard to store eggs because they're not very durable. They go bad, they crack. So bad money is not easy to use as money. And so why don't we use things like lumber or sand or rocks or grass or bricks? Why don't we use those things that are easy to move around and to split and divide as money? And the answer is because no one would trade for that. Nobody wants sand. So money also has to be something that's valuable. And by valuable, it has to be scarce. There has to not be a lot of it. For something to be valuable, it has to be scarce. So a diamond is scarce, but sand is not. Okay, so money has a second job, not just to be easy to use, but money has a second job, easy to use, but also hard to make more. And by hard to make more, I mean scarce. So in order for a money to be effective, it has to check both boxes. Easy to use, hard to make more of it, hard to find more of it, hard to get more of it. All right, so bad money is not hard to make more. For example, we used to use seashells, but ultimately we found out that if you get in your canoe and you travel to outlying islands, you can find more seashells. Then we used glass beads because they required human labor. A certain amount of human labor had to go into every glass bead. The problem was we figured out how to mass produce them in manufacturing facilities in Europe. We used to use grain, but of course, anything like grain or wampum or corn or tobacco, ultimately, the longer it serves as money, the more people just grow a bunch of it. And then it undermines its ability to be money because it's not hard to make more. So it's not good money, even though all of these things at one point or another were used as money. Okay, so both are important, easy to use, hard to make more. So we swing between the two. We swing between the two because we're trying to find money that is both easy to use and hard to make more. And over the course of human history, it's proven to be surprisingly difficult to find something that is good money, both easy to use and hard to make more over time. Okay, so I want to give a very brief history of money here so we can see that pendulum swinging back and forth. Easy to use, hard to make more. Easy to use, hard to make more. Okay, so in the early days, we used seashells, glass beads, grain. We used a lot of things as money. They were all easy to use, but they were not hard to make more. They ultimately failed the scarcity test. They were just not hard enough to make more, so they ultimately fell by the wayside as money and were replaced by something else. So not hard to make more. They checked the easy to use box, but in doing so, lost the hard to make more box. Okay, so we switched to gold. We switched to gold because gold was scarce. It was hard to find more and you couldn't make more. So gold was scarce. And so the importance of being hard to make more was so important that we switched to gold because easy to use just wasn't cutting it anymore. Okay, so first we used gold with no government involved at all. Then, so it checked that sort of hard to make more box, but again, it was not easy to use. So it was not doing the job of money. For example, gold is hard to spend. You know, how much gold for a cup of coffee? Is it a pinch? Is it a grain? Can you even see the amount you need for a cup of coffee? How do you split a big piece in half? How do you know it's gold and not tungsten on the inside? All sorts of issues with it having it spin. In large quantities, it's very heavy, so it's actually hard to send. It's not very portable, and it's hard to store because, of course, it can get stolen. And you know, there's no way to sort of store it in a digital bank or something like that. So, but money, gold money did work in the old days. In the old days where we didn't have the internet, we didn't have telephone, the telegraph, email, it did work well enough. But it couldn't keep up with technology. As long as the way money was used was we were shipping it around on ships and stuff, it sort of worked. Now, you could use the Pony Express to send a letter saying you were transmitting, you know, someone $1 million. You couldn't really load that gold on the pony itself because it'd break the pony's back. So it was heavy, but it kind of worked when we were transporting money around with ships and with carriages and things like that. But in the age of the telegraph, the computer, the smartphone, gold just failed. It could not keep up because it couldn't be transported as easily as you could send a telegraph message or an email on a computer or use a mobile app. So gold failed. So gold gave up easy to use. It was hard to make more. And in fact, it's the hardest thing to make more of or to find more of on the periodic table. But we gave up easy to use. So ultimately, gold was doomed to also fall by the wayside. So the idea was, could we make gold easier to use? So we tried government imprinted gold. We stamp a government figure on it, and that way we know the amount. We know its purity, because if you cheat it, the government will come and get you. And but anyway, and could we make gold coins easier to use? So let me back up here. So we used government imprinted gold, but that still had issues. It still had divisibility issues. It still had durability issues. It still had portability issues. And so the idea was, can we make gold coins easier to use? So governments had this idea of, let's make paper a promise for gold, which will make it easier to use. That way you can just carry around paper, not the gold. Okay, so if you zoom in on a $10 bill, anyone could exchange paper bills for gold coins. It literally said on it, and this is in the highlighted section in the orange, up there at the top, it says, this certifies that there has been deposited in the treasury $10 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. So literally the paper you carried around, a $1 bill, a $10 bill, a $100 bill, that paper said on it that anytime you could swap the paper for the gold or the gold for the paper. That way you could carry around the paper, but you could always get the gold. That way the gold was scarce, hard to make more. The paper was easy to use. So that was the idea behind paper money. And the promise of paper money was that these words would always appear on the paper money, that it would always say that you could always get gold coins instead of the paper, or paper instead of the gold coins. The problem is the government printed way too much of the paper. There wasn't enough gold. They basically cheated the system. The government cheated the system by printing way more paper than they had gold in Fort Knox. So in 1971, the government broke the promise and changed the words on the paper to just Federal Reserve note. They deleted all the part about where you could exchange it for gold or vice versa. So paper money just became paper. It was just paper. It had value because it used to be based on gold, but it wasn't anymore. And the amount of paper that they could print, it was just paper. It had no connection since 1971 to gold whatsoever. So today's money is just government printed paper, which I'll give it is easy to spend. It's easy to send with mobile payment apps like Venmo or PayPal or whatever, or Cash App. It's easy to store in a bank because it's just paper. It's just paper. It's easy, not heavy. So it solved the problem of being easy to use because it sort of worked in a world where you could send, the digital version of paper money over the internet, over email, over the telegraph. But it had a problem. It was not hard to make more and more and more and more and more. So once the government realized that they could print unlimited money, they did. The money just rolled off the printing presses, not connected to gold, not connected to anything. It was literally, we can print as much as we want as long as the people don't figure out that they're getting completely screwed over by all the prices rising. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So printing paper is easy as that Staples Easy button. Anytime the government wants money, they just print more of it out of thin air. And technology made the printing of that money even easier. They just print numbers. They print ones and zeros. Literally, the numbers that control how much money there are, they're just in a database at the Federal Reserve. And when they want to make more money, they just change the numbers. Like, it doesn't even require a printing press. They just make up money out of thin air. Okay, so dollars are easy to use, but not hard to make more. So they fail again, the test. And every time a money has failed the test over time, whether it was because it was not scarce enough, whether it was because it could not keep up with technology, or vice versa, whenever it has failed the test, it has opened the opportunity for a new form of money that goes back to trying to check both of the boxes rather than just one of the boxes. Okay, so dollars swung way over to easy to use, but completely gave up on being hard to make more entirely. Okay, so politicians have to limit the printing of money. You can guess how that goes. They print. So over the last 100 years, on average, the government has printed about 7% more dollars on average every year. So more dollars, as they pump more dollars into the system, and as your paycheck doesn't keep up with that, they pump 20 times as much dollars into the system, but your paycheck, only goes up a tiny fraction of that. Everything you buy gets harder and harder and harder. Okay, so over time, they print all this money, and it requires more and more and more and more and more and more money to buy the exact same stuff. So numbers go up, dollar printing just completely out of control. As a result of that, the value of the dollar goes down. The value of the US dollar is down 95% since 1935. Just 90 years, we've lost 95% of our money's purchasing power. What's left of the value of your dollar? Literally 5 cents. 5 cents. What you could buy for 5 cents back in 1935 costs you a whole dollar now. What you could buy, for a dollar back then now costs 20 times as much. You literally have 5 cents of your purchasing power left after 90 years. So are other countries' money any better than the US dollar? There's about 160 currencies around the world by other nations. So it turns out every country prints money, and virtually all of them are way worse than the US dollar. So in addition to all the value that's lost by the US dollar, the Venezuelan bolivar up here is down in the last 10 years, an additional 99.9%, on top of how much the US dollar is already down. Let's look at just some other major currencies. The Argentinian peso is down 98.3%, the Turkish lira down 92.6%, the Russian ruble down even 66%. Again, this is just in the last 10 years, on top of the devaluation of the US dollar. So this is like compounding. Their currencies are way worse off than the US dollar, and the US dollar has lost 95% of its value in the last 90 years. Okay, so money has changed over time, and the rate of change of what money we use has accelerated. So shells, beads, and grain back from 5000 BC to the present up to 2000 years into AD, where we are now in the year 2025. Shells, beads, and grains lasted a long time. Then they were replaced by gold. Gold has lasted less time. And then paper has only been around just a couple hundred years. And the US dollar has only been the world reserve currency for decades, not even hundreds of years. It's just since post-World War II that the US dollar has been the world reserve currency. So the rate of change of money is accelerating because of the rate of technological change and because people keep looking for a better money that is easier to use and hard to make more. Okay, so are there other options other than this printed money that everybody's using that's losing value? Your paycheck's not keeping up. Every time you go to Kroger or Costco, it feels like, how on earth could this be so expensive? Again, you got Campbell's soup up, 10x, 10 times as expensive since 1973. You've got the Big Mac is up 12 times, more than 12 times as expensive since 1968. Are there other options? The answer is yes, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is better money. Let's talk about it. Okay, so Bitcoin. Bitcoin, what is it? It is a network of computers like the internet distributed all around the world. That is what runs Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is similar to digital gold, except no government involvement. So we don't have all those problems that government causes. Bitcoin makes it easy to trade between all of these things. It is not controlled by any company or any government. Again, similar to the internet, it is a network of computers spread all around the world that control the Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ledger and keep everything in sync and all that. It's not controlled by a company or a government, and we'll go into technically how it works in a minute. Okay, does Bitcoin do money's two jobs? Is it easy to use, and is it hard to make more? And the answer is yes, it is easy to use. Bitcoin is very easy to use. It's easy to spend, in fact, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's infinitely divisible. It's easy to send. You can send Bitcoin anywhere in the world, 24/7, day or night, to anyone, anywhere. It's the only kind of money that can do that. And it's easy to store. It's very durable. We'll talk about that. So Bitcoin is good money because it's easy to trade with. And you can use, for example, I buy everything with the Coinbase debit card. It is a debit card that spends my Bitcoin. And so I can use this anywhere in the world. I can use this with any ATM network anywhere in the world. It'll spit out the local currency. I can use Bitcoin to spend anything for anything I want anywhere in the world. So it checks the box of being easy to use as good money. It's also divisible, and so it's easy to spend. So each Bitcoin can be subdivided into 100 million parts, which makes it 1,000,000 times more divisible than the US dollar. The US dollar can only be divided into 100 parts, which is 100 pennies, which means you can't do microtransactions For example, you can't set it up where every time someone sends you an email, they have to pay a tiny piece of something, as a cost to eliminate spam. You can't do that with the US dollar because you can't get smaller than a penny. With Bitcoin, you can get 1,000,000 times more divisible than the US dollar. So Bitcoin is also digital, so it's easy to send between any computers, any phones, any electronic devices, anywhere on the internet. It's easy to send. And so how can digital be durable? If it's digital, like an email, how can we make sure it's durable, like it's going to last forever? So durable means unchangeable. It means your money will be there for you 1,000 years from now. It means your money won't be destroyed. It means it won't be printed more of. So let's talk about that. So Bitcoin is controlled by millions of computers that are securing and auditing the Bitcoin network every 10 minutes. So they're doing it constantly, but the entire ledger is audited and secured every 10 minutes. The Federal Reserve, which was created in 1913, has not been audited a single time in the last 112 years. So the paper money system has never been audited. Bitcoin is audited the entire network and every transaction every 10 minutes, and the Bitcoin computers are constantly auditing and securing the network even between those 10-minute intervals. So is Bitcoin hard to make more? Yes, the Bitcoin network has rules. One of the rules is there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in circulation. So right now there's about 20 million Bitcoin in circulation. So there will never be more than 21 million. And all of the remaining Bitcoin will enter circulation between now and the year 2140, which is 115 years from now, 115. So we almost have all of the Bitcoin that will ever exist today, as compared. And with regard to the rules, everyone has to agree to change the rules, including you. So there's no way to change that absolute finite amount of Bitcoin of 21 million unless all of the owners of Bitcoin agree to that change. And if even one of them, objects to the change, then the real Bitcoin with a $21 million limit will continue regardless of what anyone else does. So the rules are unchangeable unless there is consensus by everyone. So with US dollars, a few politicians decide how many to print. They decide, and you don't. The Federal Reserve Board of 12 governors just makes up a number of how much money they want, and they just print it out of thin air. You don't get any say in that. Using Bitcoin is deciding against inflation. Boom. In a world of Bitcoin, your problem of inflation, of prices constantly going higher all the time, goes away because you can't inflate Bitcoin. It has that hard cap of 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist. Okay, so which is why the price of Bitcoin is going up. People are opting out of the fiat, which means made up. The US dollar is a fiat currency. Fiat means made up by fiat, by dictate, by out of thin air. So as people opt out of that system and trade their US dollars for Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin goes up, and ultimately people are making that migration. Now, the price goes up and down over time because lots of people are trying to figure out how quickly we're going to make that transition to Bitcoin. So depending on the day, people are positive it's right around the corner, or it might take a couple decades. The price goes up and down with adoption as people are trying to figure out how big of a deal is Bitcoin now, and how quickly are we all going to transition to Bitcoin as the future monetary system of the world. But the price is going up, and at 7% growth, the US dollar, which currently there's more than 20 trillion US dollars in circulation right now, as the price of that at a 7% growth rate, which has been the historical trend for the last 100 years, there will be 3,000% more US dollars in circulation, which is $618 trillion, 3,000% more. So $300 for every $1 today. I need to check the math on that. I didn't check the zeros. That might be 30. It might be 300. Regardless, I'll check the math. It's either 3,000% more, which would be 30x more, or it's 300x more, which is 30,000%. Anyway, I need to check the math on that. But it's one of those two. We just got to reconcile that. Anyway, short take is there's a gazillion more dollars in 2075 than there are today as compared to $1. Okay, so we're going to be paying 12x more for a Big Mac 50 years from now. It's going to be $64.70 a Big Mac. Now, you think that's crazy, but if you had asked people back in 1968 whether a Big Mac would ever cost $5.29, they would say that's you're out of your mind. That's insane. That is 12 times as much as what you could buy a Big Mac for back then. All I'm saying is this is going to cost 12 times as much 50 years from now, which is almost a certainty. And, you know, we don't want to be paying $65 for a Big Mac, and your salary might have gone up, but it's not going to go up 12x. And so you're going to be significantly underwater. It will be much more difficult to buy a Big Mac or a can of Campbell soup or something like that 50 years from now. Meanwhile, one Bitcoin might just buy you an entire McDonald's restaurant. So as the price of Bitcoin, the purchasing power goes up, the US dollar goes down, which means everything gets more and more expensive. It gets harder for the average American to buy a house, harder to buy a car, harder to buy a share of stock in the S&P 500, which is the stock market. The 500 largest US companies is the S&P 500. Harder to buy a share of stock, harder to send your kids to college, harder to buy healthcare. Everything's harder. And it's harder because your money is losing value at a rate much faster than your paycheck is going up. So Bitcoin is easy to use money. It checks that box, and it checks the hard to make more box, which is a huge deal because it is the first time in human history that a single money has checked both of those boxes, and therefore was an ideal fit for where human civilization is right now. We live in a digital age, and we have a digital money now, which is Bitcoin, that is both easy to use and hard to make more. So what happened to our money? The short story is we've been looking for good money for a long time, but nothing has really checked both boxes, hard to make more and easy to use. And we've had these trade-offs as technology has made gold too hard to use, or transportation has made seashells too plentiful. And we've landed at US dollars where politicians print them to oblivion. Technological change has resulted in all of these trade-offs, that pendulum swinging back and forth, always trying to get both good money that is easy to use and hard to make more. And in the case of gold, for example, you could, with the invention of the telegraph, you could telegraph in a second that you were transmitting value, you were sending money across the ocean. The promise is it took forever for the gold to actually change hands. So the gold just couldn't keep up. And ultimately, that's why we ended up with paper representations of money. So politicians keep printing money into oblivion, and our money's losing value. But thankfully, there is a money that is gaining value. As the old money is losing value, the new money is gaining value. And as adoption is increasing, the value of the new money is going up much faster than just the rate at which the US dollar is losing value, because Bitcoin is actually going up for two reasons. It's going up because the US dollar is losing value, but it's also going up because of adoption. More people are using it, which is making the price of Bitcoin rise much higher. In the long term, and a Bitcoin will go up by about 3% a year. Even after complete and total worldwide adoption, Bitcoin's value will still continue to go up in purchasing power by about 3% per year. And the reason for that is humans get better at making stuff. Excuse me. Humans get better at making stuff on average about 3% per year. So we get 3% better at making everything, and therefore the money has 3% more purchasing power because the money, in the case of Bitcoin, is fixed. So Bitcoin solves both problems, easy to use, hard to make more, and it permanently puts a stop to inflation, which has been plaguing us from the beginning of human civilization. So Bitcoin is that better money. So with that, I want to go through a few highlights of Bitcoin. One thing I can't decide is whether the next part of what I'm going to cover should be in the main part of the presentation, or whether it's too technical and people's eyes glaze over and they just don't want to know. So one second. So there's two schools of thought here. One school of thought says, keep it super simple like the presentation so far. And the other school of thought says, yeah, but skeptical people are going to say, yeah, but how does Bitcoin do that? How does it work? So I want your feedback on that. Okay, so Bitcoin is better money. So whether this is an appendix or part of the main presentation, I would love your feedback. So how does Bitcoin work? So Bitcoin transactions are grouped into blocks. And all of the transactions that anybody makes over the course of 10 minutes are built into blocks. And then Bitcoin computers, which are called mining computers, those computers build a new block about every 10 minutes. They take all the transactions that have happened in the previous 10 minutes, they package them up in a block, and a Bitcoin miner, which is the computers that secure and audit the network, they're called Bitcoin miners. And they're called miners because for the job of securing and auditing the network, they get a little bit of Bitcoin every 10 minutes. They get a little bit of Bitcoin plus whatever the transaction fees are. In the long term, it's just transaction fees. So it requires energy to do that. The Bitcoin mining computers have to use energy. Those Bitcoin miners are spread all over the world. There's no central control. There's no central man. It's completely decentralized, meaning it's sort of like the internet. It's everywhere all the time. So, and using energy in order to mine those Bitcoin transactions and put them on the Bitcoin ledger is important because you can't fake it. So with blockchains like Ethereum or Solana or Cardano, or with meme coins, or with, crazy stuff that people are trading that's sort of crypto, you can fake it. You can fake it and generate more of it. You can fake it and change it. Bitcoin is based on Bitcoin mining, which uses energy, and energy cannot be faked. You can't fake gravity. You can't fake energy. And it is very important that for the monetary system of the world, in order to make sure it stays scarce, you have to anchor it in something in the world. You have to anchor it in matter, or you have to anchor it in the periodic table, like gold, which is a compound that cannot be, there's no alchemy, you can't make up gold, or you have to anchor it in energy or matter. Like you have to anchor it in something. And Bitcoin is anchored in energy. So just like you can't fake scarcity with gold because it's on the periodic table, you can't fake Bitcoin because you can't fake energy. Energy is a real thing. It cannot be faked. Okay, so new blocks are added to the blockchain by Bitcoin miners as they use energy to package up those blocks and add them to the chain of Bitcoin blocks that represent all of the transactions that have ever happened. So in the early days, the Bitcoin network was very small. And it was secured by just the computing power of one computer, because the inventor of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, was mining Bitcoin with his own personal computer. So that was the only computer that was mining, that was securing and auditing the network, until literally the next day when the very second person started running a computer. Over time, by about 10, years and years ago, it was secured by the energy usage of a small town. Over time, it got even bigger to being about 10 years ago, the energy usage of Jackson, Mississippi, about every 10 minutes. And now the Bitcoin network is secured by about the amount of energy equivalent to New York City. Now, that does not have anything to do with how many transactions are processed on the Bitcoin network. That just has to do with how much computing power is securing and auditing the network. It's the same amount of computing power, whether there's one transaction or a million transactions. It's similar to a bank vault. The question is how many armed guards or how many tanks are guarding a bank vault? Well, if you got 20 tanks, it's 20 times as secure as if you got one tank. So you want a lot of energy going into securing and auditing the Bitcoin network. And right now, that energy level is equivalent to New York City. It does not go on forever. It plateaus at some level that is a very small fraction of the world's electricity usage. So a lot of blocks built with a lot of energy. So far, the Bitcoin blockchain, all of the blocks that have been mined every 10 minutes for 16 years, has resulted in 880,000 blocks on the Bitcoin blockchain. Every one of those blocks built with energy. To change the entire blockchain, you'd have to rebuild every block. That's why you can't cheat Bitcoin. That's why you can't change it. That's why you can't go back to the beginning and reverse a transaction, because all of that energy that was used to secure and audit the Bitcoin network has resulted in a bulletproof Bitcoin network over 880,000 blocks. And if you were to try to change it, you would have to rebuild the entire blockchain from the very first block to the last block, which, if the entire Bitcoin network stood still, would require all of the energy usage of Canada for a year. But the Bitcoin network keeps going. So you can never chase it. You can never catch it, which means the Bitcoin network is the most immutable thing. It's the most unchangeable thing humanity has ever created or invented or discovered. So that is why Bitcoin is durable. That's why you can trust it with your money. That is why you know there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. So isn't the energy use a problem? It actually isn't, because all of the energy use that's used to secure Bitcoin is only 0.1% of global energy usage. Things like air conditioning, refrigeration, all use infinitely more electricity than Bitcoin. Bitcoin just uses a fraction of the world's energy, but because Bitcoin is anchored in energy, and because you can't cheat energy and you can't fake computing power, it absolutely secures and audits the Bitcoin network, ensuring that there will only be 21 million, which is why Bitcoin is more valuable as a cryptocurrency than all the other cryptocurrencies in the entire world and all the meme coins and everything combined. Bitcoin is much more valuable than all of those combined because it is the only thing you can trust as digital money. Okay, so also it's a lot less expensive than our current money. Our current money, you got buildings, you got security, transportation, all these IT systems, and a bunch of bankers. So if you think, well, the US dollar doesn't cost us anything, it's just a piece of paper, it's not. Look at every major city. There's banks and banks and banks everywhere. All of those banks use energy. All of those banks are eating huge amounts of time and energy just to keep the US dollar system afloat and all the paper systems. So the money in our existing system is spending and frankly wasting a huge amount of energy. At least the energy usage in the case of Bitcoin is used to secure and audit the money instead of paying for a bunch of stuff on top of it. So the slides that are not built out yet is how is it limited exactly? Like how do we know with absolute certainty that there will never be more than 21 million? But I don't have those slides yet. Also, this is from the Wall Street Journal. It said behind Bitcoin's rally is a simple fact. Supplies are limited. And this is an actual chart from the Wall Street Journal showing that there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin with all of the credibility of the Wall Street Journal backing that. Okay, so that is the last slide. I am going to stop sharing here. Go back to full screen. And I would love your feedback on that. Some things I want your feedback on is the idea of scarcity as opposed to hard to make more, for example. In the presentation, we're saying Bitcoin is easy to use and hard to make more. We could say easy to use and scarce. I kind of like the way easy to use, hard to make more rolls off the tongue, but some people might understand the concept of easy to use and scarce, even though those are not really sort of parallel word sets. Would love your feedback on that. Would love your feedback on the part at the end of the presentation about how the blockchain works. That strikes me as super confusing, unless you have a lot of time to explain it and answer questions. But I also am reluctant to leave it out of the presentation entirely and just get to the end and everybody's like, okay, Joel says Bitcoin's better money. It's easy to use and it's hard to make more. But how? But why? So I'm wrestling with how do you get the how and the why of why it is easy, why it is secure, why it is durable, why there will not be more than 21 million. How do you do that without getting lost in the details and the weeds of how the blockchain works and how it's secured by energy and all of that? Would love your feedback about all of this, including like the pendulum that swings back and forth. Is that a helpful analogy? Or should we just stick with check boxes? Easy to use, hard to make more. Would love your feedback. Nathan McNeil is amazing. He and I are collaborating on this deck. He's the one that did all the slides and most of the brain power that went into this. So would love your feedback on this deck. I really want to build a presentation that we can put on the internet for anyone to use, anyone to download, borrow slides, duplicate slides, change slides, basically an open source presentation that anyone can use to help explain what is broken about money and how to fix it and how Bitcoin fixes it. So I would love your feedback on that. That's my only request for my 45th birthday, which is today, is your feedback on this presentation. Would love to hear it. Send it my way. Have a great day, everyone. And I posted today on Facebook. If you message me on Facebook Messenger, I'll send you $30 of free Bitcoin. I just have to check your account and make sure it is not a fake or scam account because there's a lot of those going around. But I'd love to give you some free Bitcoin. I don't know if that's just for today and tomorrow. I don't know. If it gets out of hand, I'll have to call it, I'll have to call it into it at some point. But right now, I'm giving away $30 free Bitcoin to anybody who's following me on Facebook or friends with me on Facebook. So have a great day, everyone. Love you all. Thank you. And please send your feedback my way. You can message me on Facebook Messenger. You can message me on text message 601-207-0813. That number again, 601-207-0813, or Facebook Messenger, or just however you can email me, joel@joelbaumgar.com. However you want to send feedback. The easiest is probably Facebook Messenger because it works for voice notes and it's integrated with Facebook. So would love your feedback. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.